it was a pretty high hill for Ireland. Now this man had the most amazing vantage point with his cottage on the top of the hill. And even though he only had a small farm himself, he would stand on the top of this mountain and survey the lands around him, and felt that he'd never seen anything so beautiful. And all the people in the neighboring villages would see him standing there, and they used to call him the Lord of Benbow. Now he had one son, and sadly, his wife died in childbirth. But he brought this boy up. He hoped to love the land the way he did. The boy got to be a teenager, and all his thoughts of love of the land disappeared. He couldn't think of anything else but getting off of Ireland and going somewhere else to seek his fortune. So the day came when his father sent him to market with a cow. Now we all know this kind of story. He sold the cow. There were no magic beans. But he took the money from the sale of the cow, and he bought himself a fine suit of clothes and a ticket to go by boat to England to seek his fortune. And so off he went, and when he got there, he couldn't believe the cities, because he landed in Liverpool, and he checked that out. He went to London, but the cities were just too much for him. So he began to explore the countryside. And one day, as he was walking along a road, he came to two large pillars of a large gate, the entrance to an estate. And in there, he saw a huge mansion. And he couldn't help but start to daydream and think, that is the kind of place where I should live. And as he was thinking these thoughts, suddenly at his shoulder, he heard a voice saying, "And who might you be?" And he looked over his shoulder, and there was the most beautiful young woman that he had ever met. And he drew himself up and he said, "Well, I'm from Ireland, from Northern Ireland, and I am the son of the Lord of Benbow." And so she looked at him with new interest. I mean, he was nice looking, but also sounded like he might be her equal. And he looked at her and saw her fine clothes. And she said, "And my father is the Duke, and this is where I live." And so she invited him in for lunch. Now, no sooner had he got in the door and got his feet under the table than he began with the stories about his father's castle on the high mountain in Northern Ireland, and all the land, and his goats and his sheep, and everything about that place that he had left. And then he continued on with his storytelling and said that he had lost all his luggage and he had nowhere to stay. And so they invited him to stay there. "Well, of course you'll stay with us." And so he stayed the night, and soon he stayed a week, and soon it was coming up to be a month. Meanwhile, the Duke was noticing that his daughter was beginning to fall in love with this handsome Irishman. And he thought, I better find out something about this Lord of Benbow. And so off he went to the library, and he looked in those books of peerage, Dubrett's and Burke's, but nowhere could he find any reference to the Lord of Benbow. And so he came back to his home, and he decided to send one of his servants over to Ireland. And he called a young man and said, "Here is money for a ticket to Ireland. Now I want you to go over there and find out whatever you can about the Lord of Benbow." And he gave him the instructions as close as he could as to where he lived. And so off went the young man. And, you know, transportation in Ireland even isn't great these days, but back then it was really difficult. It was, once he'd landed in Ireland, it was horse and cart the whole way. And it was very long and arduous, but he followed the directions as closely as he could, and as he felt he was getting closer, he began to ask if this was the way. Is this the way to the Lord of Benbow's castle? And people would kind of go, oh yeah, just keep on going. And so on he went until he got as far as the horse and cart could go, and people were still saying, right, yeah, up the mountain, you'll find the castle for sure. And so there he was, he had to walk now. It was getting dark, and it was just a small path going up. And in Ireland they call it a boreen, just a little laneway. And as he went climbing up the mountain, it got darker and darker. And all of a sudden he heard a clashing and clanging of metal, and he imagined the Lord of Benbow's army. But then he looked around and he saw a lot of goats with, their bells and clanging, and it was, so okay, all is well. And he kept on going, and up and up, and then he saw a light over in the distance, and he thought, the castle. And so he got closer and closer and realized he was on the top, but there was no castle. There was just a small stone hut with a little smoke coming out of the chimney and one window with a light. And he got up to the door, and he was like, this isn't even a door, it's just a straw thatched mat. And that's called a sugan doris in Ireland. So he couldn't really knock, but he called out, hello there. And soon the door, the flap was opened up, and he looked inside. There was an old man. There was a little fire, a peat fire going, one bed, a stool, and a small table, and a lamp. And the old man said, oh, you must be lost. Come in, come in. And so he was very hospitable, invited the young man in, said, sit down by the fire. And he made the young man a cup of tea. And it was so delicious. It was made with goat's milk. He'd never tasted anything like it. And then the old man said, and now you'll not be going back down the mountain tonight. You'll stay here with me. And the young man looked around, and he only saw the one bed, and he thought, well, where will I sleep? And anyway, the old man went outside and cut fresh rushes and laid them on the floor and with a few blankets. The young man was so exhausted. He lay down on those rushes, and he had the best sleep he had in his entire life, and woke up the next morning to see the old man cooking porridge, stirabout. And he invited the young man to come to the little table, and he had this porridge again made with goat's milk. He felt he'd never tasted anything so delicious. And the old man was so kind and hospitable. And then when they finished breakfast, the old man said to the young man, well, tell me, where are you from and what are you doing here? And the young man said, well, I'm from England. And then the old man's face that had been so lit up with smiles suddenly became sad. And he said, I have a son, or I had a son, and I think he might have gone to England. I don't know. He might have been in England. He might not be. I don't know if he's alive or if he's dead. And then the young man said, that is why I am here. I am here to tell you about your son. He is in England, and he's about to be married to the daughter of a duke. And the old man's tears turned to laughter, and he was like, oh, my son, that sounds just like him. Of course. Oh, thank you for bringing me this news. And so they talked, and finally it was time for the young man to go back. And so off he went. He followed the route back, walked down the mountain, horse and cart, ship back to England. And soon he was back to the mansion, the Duke and his family and the daughter. And the Duke called him in immediately and said, all right, tell me about, what did you find out? Did you find the Lord of Benbow and his castle? And the young man said, I did. Sir, I found the Lord of Benbow. Well, tell me about him. Well, he said, he has an army that you would not want to meet in the middle of the night. And his castle, oh my goodness, it's on the top of this mountain, and the view of his kingdom, you've never seen the like of it anywhere in England. Now, the castle itself, well, the door, there wouldn't be a carpenter in England who could replicate that. And I tell you, he brought in a brand new bed for me that night that I stayed. And the next morning he threw it out because he would bring in a new one for the next guest. And the food that I ate there, you could never find a chef in England who could make that food. And the hospitality of the Lord of Benbow was incredible. And let me tell you, your daughter is so lucky to be marrying the son of such a fine gentleman.